New year, new series, Coach's Corner on the Find Your Ultra podcast.
This sport has no shortcuts. There is a pace at which the body will learn and grow, and especially for Indians who don't have much background in endurance sports and impact sports, we have more setbacks initially.
So in the coaching process, what information or data do you really focus on and what do you consciously ignore?
So there are two aspects to this, the athlete and the coach. To the athlete, we really don't want you to look at much data.
What should be the recovery time after, let's say, a 10K race, a 21K race, a marathon and a 100K?
A hard 4+ hour effort in a race scenario, you're probably taking at least 2 weeks off.
You want to give away some general principles for fueling and hydration?
200 to 250 for the road runner, 300 plus for an ultra marathoner. You can push it to 400, insane. In terms of hydration,
I heard you say the other day, LSD is dead. Why do you say that?
it's not dead. They're specifically good for some people, like a beginner who's never done 30-kilometer run in a marathon block. But someone like you or any experienced runner.
How do you decide what's your longest run going to be leading up to, let's say, 100K?
Yeah, I saw a lot of people doing overnight runs in preparation for the border, for the 100-miler. But physiologically, that doesn't work.
People feel that a 100-miler will involve running at night and they have not run through the night, so they do need to experience
Do that, absolutely. Much recommended, but do it in a different way. You don't have to run through the night.
You're also a big believer that coaches should charge more.
Yeah, this is a tough conversation because our job as coaches is to really help people find their way,
Find the ultra.
Find their ultra, yeah.
Tell us, what are your thoughts on the use of technology in coaching and where it can really help and where it can also become a crutch sometimes?
AI is coming. In another 2-3 years, AI will be in coaching, and a lot of coaches who are not taking to tech are just going to get obsolete.
Please help our audience map their fitness journey as they go about setting new goals in 2026.
This is a very important part of anyone's fitness journey.
This is a special limited series where we will have conversations with coaches from across different fields. There will be running coaches, there will be perhaps nutrition coaches, sports psychologists, physiotherapists, and different kinds of coaches basically. This will be different from our regular episodes where we deep dive into person's own journey. Here we will of course have a little bit of that because you can't just expect someone to sit across and say, "Chalo ji, gyan dena shuru karo." We won't do that. We will get to know the person a little bit, but we won't go deep into like race stories and experiences and all of that. This will be more structured, more specific to extract the maximum amount of value from the coach. This is for you and me to learn and raise our game. So there will be questions about nutrition, hydration, recovery, mindset, specific questions about these, and there will be specific takeaways. The frequency of this series has not been decided yet. It may be monthly, it may be once in 2 months. We'll see. And also, even the structure will be a little fluid in the beginning. We will get more specific as we go, as we learn more. You will tell us, you will teach us how to do this better. So please reach out to us. My DMs are always open. I respond to all of them. Please send me a message and let us know your feedback, what your thoughts are, and what would you like us to cover? What are the things that you want to know more about? We will deep dive into those. And before we get started with the episode, I have one quick appeal to make. You, the listener or the viewer, are a very important part of our journey. You are a part of our history. Whatever we are making here is only because of you. If you don't watch, if you don't tune in, if you don't share, subscribe, like, if you don't do any of that, the show does not exist. So whatever gesture you can do, watch the full episode if you can, listen to it. If you can, share it with anybody who might find it useful or might be remotely interested, might find value in it. Please share and subscribe and do all of that because that's the only way we can grow. That's the only way we can actually sustain, because all of this is a heavy cost and we don't make any money out of this for now. Help us do that. Help us sustain the show. Help us create more value for you. Please do this. Thank you, and let's dive in. Welcome everyone to this new series that we are starting called Coach's Corner on Find Your Ultra podcast. This is the first episode in that series. We're going to speak with a bunch of coaches, select coaches, I would say, not every coach. We'll choose a handful of coaches in India and get to know their coaching philosophy, the way they go about coaching someone, the way, we'll try and highlight through the series the differences between their different styles. And my purpose is going to be for those who have coaches are able to see the contrast in their coach and the, a new coach's style. And also those who've never had a coach maybe they can get a sneak peek into what it is like to work with a coach. And also we'll also try and extract some useful information for runners, and for when we're interviewing a fitness coach for fitness in general. So without further ado, let's dive right in. The first guest is Nakul Butta. Nakul is somebody I've done 2 podcasts with already, one for covering his personal journey and the other one about capital trails. This is the third one, so he's the first guest on Coach's Corner. Welcome, Nakul.
Thanks, Vivin. Good to be here again.
Yeah, thank you for agreeing to be the first guest on this new series.
Yeah, it's quite an honor. I think I'm excited for the next step in the podcast journey.
Yeah,
I think this will be good.
great. Thank you. Let's get started and let's try and create some value for runners and the fitness community in general. So let's get started with your running coaching journey. How did you become a running coach? You're an engineer.
Yeah, my coaching is an accidental profession now. I was just in between jobs, and at that point, I was exploring being part of running groups and seeing the social space of run clubs around 2014, 15. Um, and what came to my attention was there were a lot of really experienced runners, running for over a decade. But they'd never heard of a training plan. They were just talking to each other, getting feedback from each other and going. And these are days when internet is there. This is not some 1990s era. Internet is there. There are free online training plans were available, but most were not following. They were just listening to each other and finding some stuff online and just winging it. And since my running journey started in the US, and it started with a friend who already had a training plan, and I basically slid into half of that training plan, right? So I always sort of had a plan as part of my running experience, especially as a new road runner, who didn't have much background about distance running. So for me, there was this gap between what is out there, complimentary free training plans, coaching services, all of that, versus what I was seeing in Delhi on ground. And since I was in between jobs, I thought I'll start helping some friends and offered that. I did that for free for 6 months, and then friends wanted to continue. Then I said, guys, I still haven't found a job. Give me some little money so I can just justify my time, and you justify my time also,
Right.
because you're paying something for it, get some value out of it. And so that's how really it started, just through friends, trying to help some friends, and that grew over time. And then it came to a point where I said, okay, this is cool. This is a hobby and a passion, and can I do something out of it? But I need to earn a basic living in order to run the household and do all of that, right? Support the family and all. So that's how we started then figuring out a price point that would sustain a basic lifestyle and also grow the business, sort of a thing.
Wonderful. So let's get down to talking about your coaching. What is your onboarding process?
Yeah, firstly, someone who's found us is crazy enough to be willing to work with me, because I come across as I am a serious personality. I don't have much humor in me. I think we take coaching quite seriously, and we expect our members to be genuinely serious about what they want to do. So once that filter comes, we communicate that upfront, because that's the sort of commitment we want from them to us and from us to them, right, as a program. From there, we try to understand what is their background in fitness, what are their current goals and aspirations, why are they getting in touch with us, right? Then we get into explaining about our coaching philosophy, how we go about certain things, how the program works, and we can get into detail with that. And then we have a full onboarding process of sharing a long Google form. We have a 12-page Google form which captures every information from background to medical history to all of that. Plus, for the female athlete, we have another 3-4 pages just to capture if they've been having irregular cycles, if they're on any birth control, or whatever the issues for the female athlete are. We have a few pages on that. Are they willing to communicate with the coach on these issues? Maybe they don't want to keep it private. So we capture all of that on a very detailed sign-up form. And then the next step is to help them set up the tech, which is an integral part of our program, the technologies we use. And then comes the coaching instruction. We have one very long email, which we call General Coaching Guidelines, which are sort of the rule book for all-in running stuff, right? What are the things that you should think about? Try avoiding 3 consecutive runs if you're a beginner. and so on. There are many other rules.
Right.
So those are sort of like stepwise coaching process. And then obviously adding to different WhatsApp groups and many other steps come through. But I think the key thing is to communicate our coaching approach and philosophy, which I think at All In Running is genuinely unique, not only in India, but around the world. I consider us as the only truly holistic coaching program in the country, and one of the few in the world, really. What I mean by holistic is these 5 dimensions of, we say, training or wellness, which is your cardiovascular endurance. This could be running, cycling, whatever cardio endurance activity you want to do, strength training, mobility work, nutrition, and mental. And as far as I know, we're the only program that have all of these 5 dimensions under one umbrella, right? Most coaches in India are either jack of all trades, that I'll give you nutrition, I'll give you strength training, I'll give you running, everything, which is great. Some people are genuinely that talented, but then they may not have a psychologist on board. There are very few programs that are out there that are very truly comprehensive and holistic. And I believe that our program is up there. So yeah, we try to explain that. And then we also get into the nitty-gritty of how does the tech work? What are our expectations as a coach? How many runs a week are you expected to do? How many strength sessions a week expected to do? So we try to set up those expectations on the first call itself. So the first call is typically anywhere between 30 to 60 minutes.
Wow.
And we try to get that clear so that there's no mismatch happening after that. Because once they're aligned, then the step 2, step 3, step 4 are within 24 hours. So the onboarding process, we try to keep it pretty fast and quick. But the first step is something we take time on because we don't want to have a mismatch. It's very important because our fuel as coaches is people's success, right? That's what empowers me to keep doing the work that we do. But if we get people on board who may have the money, but not that fire, then you're taking away my fuel for working and doing an excellent job, right? You may not have the fuel, but I also need some. So it's very important to bring people to alignment, and then really take off. So we try to communicate and spend time upfront as much as we can.
Lovely. I think that speaks a lot about the coaching process itself. It's a relationship that you're having with someone, and you will go through ups and downs, and you will have disagreements, and you should, and work around them. Learn to work around them. That's how every relationship actually grows.
And if you're not disagreeing, probably like there are so many members who are struggling currently through various challenges of life. And our job is still, to some extent, try to help them go beyond their current capacity, even if it's 1% more of what they can do. But otherwise, I feel we're not really being good coaches, Sometimes it's also helping them to go under capacity. Sometimes they're pushing too much. We're like, no, just do this much. You're doing too much. So I think a coach's job is always to look above and under the horizon and see what's right for that person also.
Wonderful. So coming to technology, you're a big advocate of technology. So tell us, what are your thoughts on the use of technology in coaching and where it can really help and where it can also become a crutch sometimes?
Yeah, I think, maybe because I come from a little bit of a tech background, from engineering background, I see technology as a tool to assist. I don't think I'm doing state-of-the-art technology. I think I'm still not using AI that much as AI has evolved. I think not too many coaching platforms have started using AI to that level. So I think I'm on par with what's happening in the world. But in India, I feel we're at a very, the coaching environment is 20 years behind. I still see most of the coaching happening over Excel or WhatsApp. And really, it's so sad to see because the athletes suffer and the coaches also suffer. They don't realize that by onboarding some basic platforms, say Training Peaks or Final Surge or Training Tilt or any of these coaching platforms that are VDOT, there's so many nice platforms out there that companies have made. They are to deliver services in a professional way and to lighten the burden of managing so many athletes that a coach would have on the program, right? So I am I've pushed many people into technology over the last 10 years. Many coaches have picked up apps now. I'm very happy to see that. But majority are still, unfortunately, living on WhatsApp and Excel. And the closed-mindedness is still there. That, look, this is working for me. I don't want to explore. It's like today I may not be using AI, but I'm willing to explore when my service provider or someone I hear is exploring AI, I would love to hear about it.
Yeah.
I think that open-mindedness needs to be there, not only on the coaching side, on the technology side, but generally in business. Otherwise, I think you're going to limit yourself in the long term. So yeah, I'm a big promoter of using technology in the coaching process, and I would happily publicly help anyone who'd like to reach out. I'm happy to mentor and guide them on how it works, what are the benefits. I've offered this to many coaches in India, and I'm willing to do that for as many people as it takes, because I feel like I should also help other coaches become better at whatever they do. They may be even better humans and better coaches than I can, but there are certain things that I bring on that they can learn from, and maybe in that exchange, I can also learn something from them.
Great. In fact, I myself know a few coaches who've been asking me, you guys use Training Peaks because I work with All in Running. And I'm like, I don't use it that much. Maybe I can put you in touch.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Happy to help as many people as I can to show them this side. Rather, we even keep talking to some platform owners who reach out to us for testing and all. And we've done that. We've explored that also. So I'm very keen to help builders, like app builders, to coaches, anyone who I can help in any way, willing to do that. Yeah.
Fabulous. Second part of the question was how can it become a crutch?
In India, service providers and coaches are expected to have more conversations offline. So, phone calls, in person meetings. So, that's where one has to understand where to bring in what tool, right? So, there are times when I do audio calls with people, video calls, meet in person. So, you have to mix the technology that supports the athlete with some personal connect based on whatever the requirements are. So I think one has to be able to juggle these things. You're not just limited to, I will only comment on Training Peaks. I'm willing to talk to you on WhatsApp. I'm willing to have some WhatsApp exchange also. So we try to monitor, because at the end, India still runs on WhatsApp. So
Yeah.
we have to manage that also.
Yeah. Great. So this actually has a cost. Like adoption of technology has a cost to itself. One is the cost of the technology itself, and the other is, of course, learning it, right? और वो learning curve भी लंबा होता है कई बार, which is why a lot of coaches don't actually put in that effort.
Yeah.
और उन्हें लगता है कि ये मुझे ही नहीं सीखना, मुझे सिखाना भी पड़ेगा लोगों को. But that cost is actually worth it. Is what
Totally.
you'd say?
And abhi YouTube pe you get so many videos to help you teach Training Peaks or any platform that's out there. And really, I can give you the basics in 5 or 10 Zoom sessions. It's not that
Okay.
complicated. As long as you know how to use a website and log in to an account, which most people do today in smartphone age. So I think it's not that complicated. And really, the cost is nothing compared to the time savings and the professionalism of your service and the sort of delivery that you can give.
Hmm.
For example, on all these platforms, we can program everyone's workout. So let's say today you have to do a 5K tempo run. So a 3K warm up with some strides, 5K at, let's say, 5 minutes a kilometer, and a cool down. So sitting on my computer, I can create this program, give you the pace ranges that you need to do, and send it to your sports watch so that when you're running, you get some guidance on how to run. Now, you can't get that on WhatsApp and Excel. And this is something that's been there for over a decade. It's not something new, and our coaches are not even using this stuff, right? So we need to at least come to this level, because AI is coming. In another 2-3 years, AI will be in coaching, and a lot of coaches who are not taking to tech are just going to get obsolete. I think AI training plans are excellent, and they're adaptive now in many places. So I think there's something to watch out for. And if coaches don't evolve, including myself, I think many people will be out of jobs.
Okay. And this then brings in another element of cost. You're also a big believer that coaches should charge more. They should charge what their worth is.
Yeah.
Talk to us about that.
Yeah, this is a tough conversation, because All in Running is a premium program in India. I would say we're one of the more expensive, if not the most expensive program in the country, from what I know. Just to give people some references, our programs start at 10,000 rupees just for running only. And then on top of that, strength, nutrition, if they have to pile up any add-ons, they just add on. So it can go north of a large amount. But generally, from what I know, the coaching ecosystem in endurance sports is anywhere between 3,000 to, let's say, 8. 8,000 rupees a month.
Yeah.
Very few in the 7 to 8, but seeing more movement towards the 7 to 8, which is nice to see. I believe that coaches invest their heart into every athlete. And if they don't, their business will not survive long enough. Athletes will discover this, right? And word of mouth will go out there. So let's talk only of the coaches who genuinely invest time and effort and really think about each athlete and really commit to their process, And if you're doing that, I think it's beyond, let's say, 3,000 rupee or a 4,000 rupee a month program. If you're putting in, let's say, 3 hours a month, this is a very low number. I think a coach puts
On
in
an
more.
athlete?
On an athlete, 3 hours a month, let's say. I think it's more than that. But let's just say as a low number, 3 hours. I think 1,000 rupees an hour is not going to be the right payoff in that perspective for the entire month. And it depends also on livelihoods and lifestyles and all of that. I just believe that coaches should value their time and their efforts, and the athletes should also do that, and they will. I think the coaches need to demand more of their time rather than a lot of new coaches who come in and they're like, look, I don't know if I can do this, so let me start with a low price point, and then over the years I will build that. And I did the same, but I soon realized that that would not sustain my everyday or monthly expenses. So we started at a point and then grew and grew organically with that. But I do believe that something like 7 to 10,000 is a very justified price point if you're giving the sort of services that you're doing. If you're casually just doing WhatsApp and doing some random calls, I think people are not going to appreciate that.
Yeah.
But if you give a structure, you deliver, these are the things we do every week, these are the things we do every month, which are very clearly defined by All In Running at least. So I think if you professionalize that delivery, then it's very easy to show value out of it, and then charge more if you give beyond that value.
Yeah.
You have to define it. So this is where I think Indian coaches have a lot of opportunity. Our price points are much lower compared to international coaches. International coaches will give you, let's say a good international coach, a recognized coach, will give you $200 to $300 a month with maybe one phone call a month, maybe 2 phone calls a month. And every phone call is another $70 to $80 because that's going to take 30 to 45 minutes of their time, So everything becomes an add-on, whereas the Indian coaches are very like, call me anytime and do this and I do that and all of that. So I feel like we're already undervaluing our time. On top of that, we're not clearly communicating what are the deliverables for each program, right? And you can create tiers. You can create a silver tier, a gold tier, a platinum tier, and define those deliverables. And that would help structure the program and your time also better and get more value out of it.
Yeah, I think AI will probably play the same role as it will in every industry, which is of filtering out a lot. I think only the serious ones will then go to a coach, and only serious coaches will be there. The non-serious ones will get a plan from ChatGPT.
Yeah, but the coaching process,
the basic guidance
yeah,
that you're going to provide for, let's say, a 3,000 or 2,000 a month that you're charging. How much will you be able to support? You need sustenance also, right? How you need then large number of athletes, right?
Yeah.
So उसमें वो quality आप नहीं दे पाओगे.
Right.
और वो जो basic quality आप दोगे भी, that is available for free.
Yeah, I recently heard a coach supporting over 100, 250 athletes, and I was like,
I've heard 250 as well.
Yeah, 250.
Yeah.
I can't imagine how that all works, right? It has to be like sort of fake coaching. It can't be like genuinely invested in every person. Globally, if you listen to any podcast of international coaches also, people are pushing anywhere between 30 to 50.
Or maybe they've made products like these 99 rupee courses. I don't know what some products they've made that they can give out for,
But then if you talk to a lot of people on that program, they feel they're getting personalized plans. So I don't know how that works, right? But internationally or as a general standard, a coach can, in a high quality program, sustain 30 athletes. If you're really working hard and you're pushing it, maybe you'll stretch to 40 and maybe in some exceptional cases, 50 athletes. If you're genuinely creating a quality product with defined deliverables and high engagement levels and high feedback rates and all of that, adaptability, all of that, then I don't think you can go beyond 30, 35. Because it takes a lot of time, effort and heart to like be invested in so many journeys. Just the way a psychologist can't take on hundreds of people. A psychologist can only take on so many stories and so many patients, So I think there's an upper cap, and that's something to also look at from all of this sort of feeds in together, right? Because if you can only serve 30 people, and let's say if you have to pay the bills for this much and save on top of that, that's how the pricing strategy will come through. Unless you're doing this as just for fun as a side gig and you have a full-time job, which is also fine. So there are
you're
different
saying
models out there.
deliver exceptional quality and charge more for it.
Absolutely. Create structured deliverables and a program that is well defined rather than just being saying, I'm a coach, come join my WhatsApp group. Here's your training plan on WhatsApp. Here's your training plan on Excel. And you call me anytime. That is not professional in my view. And then you're not using any technology, all of that. So put in the work, learn from people who are doing other things. And really, this business has been going on for decades in the West. So we have so many good examples to look up to learn from. I still say like we're not real coaches because, we don't come from a background of majors in sports physiology. We haven't been coached by people in school and college, Childhood coaching is almost nil, So we really are all experiential coaches. Maybe we've read some books, maybe we've heard podcasts,
Done some courses,
done some
certifications.
certifications. So through this accumulation, we've come to this point. But you can't, in my view, match with someone who has had coaches from 5 years old. They've seen the coach interact with you, work with you on ground. Then they've done sports majors in kinesiology, bachelor's, master's, PhDs, in sports science. And then they take on coaching. I mean, one can't compete with that. And I value those people out there. In the West, you have a lot of that. But
in India, you have all of those working with Sports Authority of India.
Yeah. But that's a completely different conversation and what Sai and other coaches are doing. I don't know enough, but I feel there's so much potential to use technology and all of that and with those coaches also. But coming back to it, if you look at the Indian space, and Indian amateur runners are also coming in adulthood. So as people who've had, let's say, over a decade of coaching, we can help 99% of them. And there are cases where a certain athlete reaches a point where I have to say, and I have to admit that, look, now you need to go to someone who's better and more certified and more experienced, to maybe an international coach. You've come to a point where all in running can get you only this far. And now it's time for you to search and step up. That's one out of maybe 1,000 cases.
Yeah.
But we are coming to a point where amateurs in India are reaching there. So it's important for us to also realize that I'm not perfect for everyone. We have our limitations. We can help 99.9% people, but that 0.1%, we have to let go and let them grow with people with more expertise.
Wonderful, sir. Talk to us about a scenario where you guided a runner differently than what they wanted, and what made you do that? Can you think of a scenario like that?
My gosh, we have hundreds, and since you run our entire corporate wellness programs, you have full idea of, like, I think most people in India, just because they've never interacted with coaches, they've interacted with trainers in gyms, but never really like coaches who do road mapping and journey mapping and figuring out what they are capable of doing. If you enter a gym, they're like, oh, let's start exercising. No one's sitting for hours and figuring out what do you really want to do and having conversations before even starting the work, right? So I think that is truly missing in all our fitness centers in India. And so since people don't have this sort of background of interaction with coaches, they really don't know what they want. Many people will look at very short-term goals. I want to lose weight. I want to run a certain distance. I want to run a certain time. And these are relatively short-term motivators, But what is it that you enjoy, and getting to the crux of what really fires them up in life? I think that's what we try to, and most people don't know. And sometimes I also am exploring, right? But through my own explorations, I've found many channels and many ways. And now I can help people show these ways to other people who come on the program, right? Be it road running, be it trail running, be it a mile race or an ultra marathon or whatever that may be, right? Mountain climbing, going for multi-day treks, whatever that may be. At least we can show them those ways and figure out what works for them, right? So when a lot of people come, they come with these sort of short-term goals, and then we take them on that journey and they start walking, and then we start showing them different ways. So let's say someone came in for a half marathon, and they did their half marathon, which they never thought they'll be able to do, because most of them thought, just get me to start running. And then we said, okay, hey, there's an event coming up, try a 5K. And you see this in the corporate programs also, right? Do a 5K. Then we're like, Arey, you did it. Great. Hey, what do you think? Do you have more time? Can you put a little bit more effort and do a 10K? Then a half marathon, right? And then we start exploring, what is it that you're liking about this? Are you liking the aspect that you're getting fitter? Are you liking the discipline aspect of it? Are you liking what impact you're making with the people around you, with your everyday lifestyle? Would you like to go and out in nature and explore something? Would you like to come for, let's say, a trail run or run with a group, maybe do some social running? Figure out what works for you and then try to explore those. And so our job as coaches is also to help people navigate these spaces, not so much just build a training plan and get them fitter. That is part and parcel of what we do.
Yeah.
But really, our job as coaches is to really help people find their way,
Find the ultra.
Find their ultra, yeah. But also I'd say that one thing that we don't do at all in running is to really help people identify their goals. We do many things unique at all in running. This is just one of them, as you know. If someone asks me that what should I do next, I will never give them an answer. We're like, go spend some time online, talk to your friends, see what people are doing. And this is some place where Instagram and YouTube actually is a positive, because you can get beautiful stories, movies, short movies, all of this information is out there.
Yeah.
And so...
But let's talk about the flip side of it, where people who are just getting introduced to running, and let's say they've done their first 10K or first 21K, and they see, they get introduced to the running community, and they see people doing 100Ks and 100 miles and like 500 kilometers and whatnot, right? And they get mind blown with that, and they get inspired and say, okay, I want to go longer and longer. And then they want to like quickly jump onto their first ultra and sign up for that.
Very
and
common
that's
in India,
very
especially.
common, right?
Yeah.
Right. So how do you navigate that, and how do you guide them?
That's a really good question. So we never give them the goals, but we say, this is what you researched. Here is what we recommend: door A, door B, door C, door D. These 3-4 options we lay out. But if they say door E, which is, let's say, the first 50K of 9 months of starting their running journey, that is not a door that we will unlock for you right now. So we just say no, right? Just recently, I was talking to someone who read a race report that I'd written for Vagamon, and the gentleman called me. And over the last 2.5 years, he's been doing an ultra every 2 months, I think. The aged gentleman. And I said, sir, it's amazing what you're doing at your age. Incredible, inspirational stuff. But I've seen this too many times in India, from young and old. And you can probably count so many cases from your own running groups also, who've gone there deep end, first year, probably a 50K by the end of the year, and then gone on that ultra running journey and then really crashed. You don't see them after 3-4 years. This sport has no shortcuts. This is running now. We can talk about fitness, but I'm coming more specifically to running now, because that's one of my fortes. This sport requires years. You cannot fast forward in this sport. There is a pace at which the body will learn and grow. And especially for Indians who don't have much background in endurance sports and impact sports, this takes more. We have more setbacks initially. We have more injuries. We have higher cardiovascular risk as Southeast Asians and all of that. So we have to consider all these things before we allow people to move forward. And in a way, a coach is sort of pulling that person back. So we're always questioning our own recommendations. Am I pulling this person back? And this is a fine line. But because at All In Running, we're really looking at 3 to 10 year journeys. We're not looking at what's next race, next 6 months, next year. We're really looking at where do we want to take this person and let them have that fire for a decade of their life or decades of their life. And in that, once that person understands that, I think they're not going to push for this pace that many people do. And I would strongly advise all these new runners who are trying to look outside, let's do our first marathon, let's do our first 50K. It's a very I've done my first 10K, and the natural response is half marathon. Then the next natural response is 42. Then the next size is 50. This is a standard 1-1-1 and you do it. Whereas I will be no, show me that you can do a faster half marathon, do 2-3 times this distance, understand what your body goes through these distances. Then you mature to a marathon. See what that monster is, right? Learn to play with that monster. then look at a bigger monster, right? And in that, explore other spaces. Maybe Indrahar, which is a 30K race that Chetan organizes, is a 10-hour effort for an average person. It's only 30 kilometers, but in the mountains, in one of the toughest races in India. So again, distance is not always the number, but also the time on feet and efforts. You gotta keep an open mind to all these things.
Have you seen that meme? Why work on improving your 10K time when you can suck at ultras and still inspire people?
Yeah, exactly.
So I think that's what
I
pulls
keep telling people that
Mm.
I think running a marathon is one of the hardest things you do.
Absolutely.
I think running a 100K is easier than running
Easier,
a
for
marathon.
sure.
I guess you have those one or two runners that are really pushing the 100K. We just had someone run a 100K under 7 hours, breaking the
Amar,
national record.
yes.
And we have some people around that number. So we have great talent in the country that are hitting this. For them, I guess their race effort is as good as a elite level marathon. But for most of us, we sleep
And it
and we
feels
eat
much
and
more
we
chill,
chill
yeah.
at 100K, right?
Yeah.
For us, I think running a strategic, hard marathon with a certain effort is so much harder than taking breaks in an ultra and all of that. So I think, or coming down to even, and this is not popular enough in India, but around the world, the mile is the most respected distance.
Yeah.
It's just the right combo of speed and endurance, right? And around the world, there are people who are just chasing miles, because they come also from a high school culture where there are mile races and all of that, right? The sub 4 minute miles and all of that. So we don't have that culture here.
Most of the runners in the running community wouldn't know their mile time.
Yeah. Barring an interval workout they're doing in their training, they're not racing a mile. So I think one should look at these things. Running a sub 17 5K is as hard as or harder than running a 4-hour marathon.
Right.
So I think we have to let go of these numbers because our tendency is 5, 10, 20. We're humans. We like numbers, right? So the number getting bigger is a sign of
Bigger.
progress.
Right.
But actually, I would disagree with that completely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And our sport, as I said, has no shortcuts. If you go down that path, you're not going to survive more than 3 to 5 years in that sport. And you see that in India so much.
Yeah. And this bugger, I have to point out, this bugger, like, he just finished his first 50K.
Yeah.
Ran 10K, first 10K in January.
Right.
And then 50K this year
This
itself.
year in December
Yeah.
itself. Yeah, and it works. And you're surprised that in the first year, people are able to run really amazing times. Many people are coming from the gym background or some other sport, and their body hasn't taken so much impact from running. So there are so many cases we train where we are still chasing the numbers they did in the first year. I have athletes who've been with us for 2-3 years and we're not even coming close to that first year. Right? Because for some reason, when the body is fresh, there are no limitations mentally. You're not gotten into the tech.
Yes.
You're not gotten into the numbers. You just run out of passion and heart. And sometimes the best performances come out of that.
Absolutely.
Right? And after that, when you get into the sport and the sport has also taken a toll on your body, that's when the problems start. And you've gotten into tech and numbers and this and that. And you see lack of performance. You see this at the elite level. We're not able to beat the national record for 5 decades almost now, right? So, if not more than 5 decades now. So, I think there's something in there about that.
What is it? 212?
212 is, I think, our national record. And
Shivnath.
despite the super
Barefoot.
shoes, despite the super shoes and despite all the sports technologies out there, coaching, all of that, people are not breaking. And this is a global trend, barring the Africans and a few other people. Generally, elites are getting a bit slower, barring the shoe impact that's coming. So, it's interesting.
Yeah. So in the coaching process, what information or data do you really focus on and what do you consciously ignore?
So there are two aspects to this, the athlete and the coach. To the athlete, we really don't want you to look at much data. We have some athletes who are really data centric, and it's fine. We encourage them that if they get excited to look at their heart rate and pace and this and that. But generally, as a coaching process, we say, look, we've given you, let's say, we have different protocols. There's pace-based training, heart rate-based training, power-based training, time-based training, effort-based training. There are different ways to give people workouts.
Yeah.
Let's say pace-based training. So if I'm looking distance and pace, then I'm like, do an 8K at this pace range, right? And that's it. Don't worry about what was your heart rate, what was that. Let the coach study in the background. Sometimes we just tell them to just go run a slow 6-kilometer run, right? Your job is not to worry about heart rate. Run as slow as you can. Don't worry that I'm running too slow. So our job really is to tell the athlete not to worry about numbers. There are some specific technical workouts. So for an advanced runner, maybe there's some interval training or pace training. That's where they need to hit the numbers, right? So that's the only exception where you kind of more number focused. But otherwise, we really strongly recommend athletes, as much as they hate or do not agree with us, to like let go of numbers. On the coaching side, again, using these technology platforms, they give you a lot of data. You can get a lot of analysis in from all the platform, the stuff that platform gives. There are charts and graphs and all of that. So you can look at that. But again, after decades of experience, you try to not get too much in it. You look at the overall journey, and if you see the athlete progressing over time, I think that is good enough. Many times on, let's say, Training Peaks, the graphs and charts are showing plateau or even a dip.
Right.
But I know that the athlete is progressing, right? So sometimes you let go of the tech and you still trust
How do you
your
decide
instinct.
that?
Well, there are multiple ways. If the athlete is reporting that they're able to run faster, even though, a lot of these performance management charts look at volume, heart rate, all of that. Now, there are going to be times when someone is not able to do high volume, but they're able to hit key workouts at like personal best paces. The chart will say you're doing half the volume that you were, so you're probably not putting in enough.
So
work.
volume is a key factor when they're showing progress. In
Every
most of the apps?
platform has their own algorithm. Some look
Mm.
at heart rate, some look at volume, some look at mix of multiple things. So you can't really judge. But generally, what I'm saying is that I know even if the graph is at times saying a dip, right? It could be that it's not representative of what's actually happening. And that's where experience as part of the coaching process will come in, you know? So you have, for the athlete, try to stay away from as much tech if you have a coach. Let them do the job. That's what you're paying the money for, right? And that's what you should pay the big bucks for,
Yeah.
because they really need to look at everything and give you feedback based, if there is feedback.
Right.
Like a lot of times they're like, what do you think of my run? I'm like, yeah, you did the distance and that's all I needed you to do. I don't need to give you more feedback. I'm looking at your cadence, heart rate in the background. I don't need to fill you with all that information, because right now I need you to enjoy this run, right? Don't get into the data, right? So a lot of times my feedback is just that much, that you did a good job, you finished the distance, don't worry about the data. If there's something that pops out that concerns your progression, I'll communicate that to you, which is a hard pill to swallow for a lot of people. They want to know, tell me this and tell me the nitty-gritty. And sometimes just top-level conversations are actually most helpful rather than getting into the nitty-gritty.
Yeah.
You know?
That's actually hard, because running is a very, it's a sport that you get really involved with.
Yeah.
Like we love Strava, we love the digging into the data. Like Strava का वो prompt भी तो आता है, nice workout,
Right.
like let's dig into the stats.
Right.
Yeah.
Or even the watches give you recovery scores, and like I have a very old watch, but new watches are giving you so much like
Your
sleep
body
score
battery
and
and
body
all of that.
battery. Like, look, are you waking up and feeling okay?
Mm.
Right? Maybe you look at your resting heart rate just to like, if you're not feeling well. But I'm not going to wake up and check my body battery every
And that's
morning.
what most people end up
Yeah,
doing,
I would
actually.
not do that. Like, it's so detrimental to the potential that you may have on that day. You may have a hard workout and maybe your body battery was lower, and you checked in the morning and now your workout is maybe compromised. Whereas you're like, look, I am not feeling great. I'm going to give my best. And then maybe in hindsight, I'll check the body battery at the end of the day. How was that trend through the day? Oh, I didn't do a good workout because maybe I didn't sleep well or something. But I would hesitate from using all this tech.
Interesting.
My watch always gives me negative performance.
Yeah.
Because my slow runs are 7 minutes a kilometer, right? Which is like slower than most of the people I train, right? And so my watch always thinks that you run at 4 sometimes and you run at 7, you're always unproductive. 90% of the time.
Yeah.
So I just ignore it.
So, I mean, going away from the structure that I've prepared a little bit, asking a personal question here. So, in my training recently, when I was training for Border, in my fitness journey, I was coming off like a very long break of 2.5 years types. So, let's say complete sedentary to like 100K finish at the Border Ultra. इस दौरान में whatever training plans I had, in that the pace ranges that were there, I was running around, I think 640. So easy pace was somewhere around 640 to 610. उस तरह का कुछ range था. You were making me run that, and And I was wondering because I had always thought, believed in marathon heart rate based training that you need to go slow. And I used to love running like around 7 minutes a kilometer. I would love to go out like for a 32-kilometer run at 7. उसी में. And that's like my all day pace. So वो करता. But here I'm being made to run like at 6:30 and I was training for BDHM also. तो मुझे लग रहा था कि चलो ये खत्म हो जाएगा तो ultras आने दो and then I'll get to my 7 minutes a kilometer pace and there's no pace pressure now. But by the time I got to that phase of the training, 6:30 and 6:20 actually became that pace, that comfort pace. So how do you decide when? Because my thinking process, or even the book that I read, 80-20, talks about there are only two things that you can play with: there's volume and there's intensity. And when determining intensity, how do you determine intensity without knowing the heart rate of the person? So how do you take that call on deciding pace changes? And a lot of people don't even wear sports watches. And even if a lot of people do, optical heart rates are notoriously inaccurate. So how do you take that call?
Heart rate training in India is a full podcast, and I'm generally not very keen to do that. One, our weather is hot in most parts of the country. Our heart rates are elevated, so even methadone methods and all, they work. Obviously, there's science and theory behind it, but it takes 2 to 3 years to get to that level. And a lot of people lose the fun of their fitness journey by that time. Unless you're really committed to that 2-3 year journey, maybe 18 months if you're lucky, I don't recommend heart rate training. And then you have to wear a chest strap and all of that. Optical will not work with methadone and all this.
And there is massive volume.
Yeah, if you can get to that level, I think is the best way to look at long-term distance running as a sport. But I think it's also important to help people have fun while they're going about, especially in the initial years of their sport. So we try to do pace or distance base, keep numbers in their motivation so that they do that. And initially their heart rate's elevated, but if you train, at the end it's all training. Right? If you keep your easy runs easy and you do some hard sessions in the middle randomly, you're going to get that sort of training impact. Right? So we see that gain over time. Without following any heart rate based training, we see our members over 6 months, 12 months come to a better heart rate zone through basic training principles. And that's good enough while keeping the fun alive, right? Otherwise, you're just doing run, walk, and it's very torturous in India because of the environmental factors and all of that. But no, in your journey, firstly, congratulations on the 100K. I'm not a coach who pats people on the back too often, but I get a lot of joy. I may not say it out too many times, but I get a lot of joy, and my joy comes through our Instagram posts. If you know, for every athlete, we make Instagram posts, and we did for you and everyone who ran the border and all the races that we do. That's where I write the post for each person, or our coaches do, whoever trained for that individual. That's our message, not to the Instagram world, but to our athletes. Those posts are dedicated, and that's where I do the pat on the back and not beyond. But I'm so happy that you're back in the game. You're putting in the time. You did your first ultra after so many years, and more so that you went through our coaching philosophy, which is quite different than what many people do. For example, a lot of people I saw training for the border also, 100 miles or 100 Ks, doing 80-kilometer long runs, overnight long runs, 8-hour efforts. And that's like 30-year-old ultra running practice. If you look at any new ultra running coach, no one's doing over 3
So that's a question that
hours.
I'll have for you later in the podcast, where we get to some specific questions about ultra. Let's talk about your week as a coach. How does that work? What does your week look like? How do you manage to build that community, be with your athletes, or how often do you be with them? And how do you make time for your own training?
I think in that also sense, all-in running operates very differently. I give kudos to all the coaches who are running on-ground programs. I think it's amazing. I think there are excellent coaches out there who have such a great community feel on ground. They meet often every week. They hang out with each other. I took a very different approach up front. I believe that someone's journey should be driven by themselves, right? And this on-ground sort of hand-holding support, while it has its merits, social running or social sport has its merits, long-term, they don't work out. So it was a very conscious decision in 2016 to make All-In Running a purely online program. I barely meet our members in Delhi. We're about 30% of All-In Running is in Delhi NCR because we're here, but rest of 70% are around the world and different parts of India also. But the 30% I barely meet once a month. And that too is not part of the program. It's not part of the deliverables. It's just for me to say hi to everyone. So we're a fully online coaching program, and it is challenging for a lot of people. It is different because generally in India, from childhood, we've had like hand-holding done, right? Through our parents, through in education, in adult life also, right? And even in the fitness space, we always have
Personal
trainers,
trainer.
personal trainers, gym memberships, something to keep you on that thing. Somewhere you invest that money and then you get something out of it in a physical space, be it a gym membership, a physical gym, or a trainer coming to you at home, and again a physical experience, right? So, and what happens is as soon as that bond is broken, a gym membership ends, or some life events comes that you can't go to the gym, or your personal trainer goes for a holiday for 2 weeks, people just stop. So recognizing this in 2016, we went fully online. Your journey, your responsibility. My job is to sit in the back seat and give you directions, but you are the person driving that car. I am not driving that car, right? So I think that is hard for some beginners because they don't have the habits in place to be consistent. I think for experienced runners, because they have been waking up in the morning and doing certain things, they have it easier on our program. But for beginners, it is challenging. And we're coming up with solutions to like figure that out with them also all the time. But yeah, we're a fully online program. We barely meet each other. That's why race finishes, especially like larger races where a lot of our community gather, are truly special. I would,
That's a one time you get to meet.
yeah, really get to meet. Or if someone's coming to Delhi, or Shreyans is in Bombay or Indore, or the cities where our coaches are, we try to do in person whenever that's possible. But generally, there are people who've been on the program for 6 months sometimes, and I've never met them, even though they live 2 miles from my home, right? So, not to say that I don't want to meet them, happy to meet them. So that also, by the way, helps really sustain their journeys long term. Also, from a coaching perspective, it helps open up our time also a little bit to deliver high end coaching services by sitting and analyzing their data, and also operate as good athletes on our own time, right?
Yeah.
So that allows all the coaches at All In Running are top end athletes. They're doing their best. I've tried to maintain my game. Shreyans is at the top of his game, one of the most incredible amateur runners in the country, in my view. What the guy does is insane. And it's similar. Our strength coaches are incredible. They're athletes. Everyone's doing it on their own model. And the online model helps them perform and also motivate others through their stories, allows them to deliver quality services, and allows the athlete to build the right habits that sustain for their lifetime. So I feel this model needs to be explored more by coaches. Internationally, most people are doing it more out of not for different reasons. But I think in India, the sort of motivation levels people have and the sort of inconsistencies they have in their fitness journeys, I feel the online model is superior, far more effective than an on-ground program. Not to discredit the value of on-ground program. As I said, I really value the coaches who are doing that, but they need to also leverage this online stuff on it. We probably need to leverage more the offline on-ground stuff that we don't do enough of. I think we have a weaker aspect on our program on that aspect, and maybe there's something that's brewing on that also
Sure.
in the coming months.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Give us a peek into your week then. What does your week look like? How do you manage to train?
Yeah, I am unfortunately...
And you have some audacious goals as well. Like you do want to do a sub-3 marathon every 5 years.
Yeah.
And this year, 3,000 kilometers, which you've just completed.
Yeah. So typically I used to run 4,000 plus. I've had years of good mileage, but we're blessed that All In Running is growing. I would say we're one of the largest coaching programs in the country. Not so known as much as people know, but we're deep in impact. We're helping hundreds, if not around 1,000 people now. So it's really good through the corporate wellness and all of the kind of impact we're making. But yeah, it is hectic. And so the last 2-3 years, as we've gone on a sort of expansion journey, thanks to you and all the other team members, has taken a toll on my own journey. But I continue to go into races every 1 or 2 years, try to make sure I came second in Malnad. Not the performance I wanted, but good enough to secure second at Vagamon. So I keep doing my own FKTs and other projects. My 15th year of sub-3, so I've done 2 sub-3s
Wow.
at 5-year gaps. And so I'm hoping that I can attempt a sub-3 in Feb again. So trying to maintain myself also in that, which is I would love to average 100, 120 kilometers a week. Unfortunately, with the sort of workloads and 14, 16-hour days, I'm able to manage 60, 70 on average in the year, which is why I set 3,000, because last couple of years had been under 3. And I hope that in the coming 2026, 3,500, hopefully, and then back to 4,000 plus in the coming years. So yeah, that's my goal. But in addition to that, I have other goals in mountain trail and many other things. So
Do you
those
share
go-
some of those?
yeah, like once the sub 3 is more like a fitness check that you're not getting old. I don't want to go sub 255 or get into that road running where cutting 2 3. I know how I can do that, and I know I have the ability to do that, but I don't want to. My journey is in the outdoors, right? So every once I do my sub 3, I go back to trail and ultra and maybe some mountain summit expeditions and other things, rock climbing maybe. So I want to get back into these things that road running sort of takes away a little bit. But this is also fun. Running fast is also fun. So excited about what 2026 opens up after this sub 3 is done.
Lovely.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah. Let's talk about some specific takeaways for runners. Let's talk about LSD. You said, I heard you say the other day, LSD is dead. Why do you say that?
Well, I think it's not dead. They're specifically good for some people, like a beginner who's never done a 30-kilometer run in a marathon block. For them, a long, slow distance is good because they've never hit that number in their head. So just getting them over that barrier that you've done 30 kilometers or even a 24, 26, 28. Every time, that first time that barrier gets broken, that's a win. So you can do that long, slow distance. But someone like you or any experienced runner, there's no point running slow at that point, right? Yeah, especially because you're training for marathon or ultra marathons, there's a certain pace your body has to sustain, right? And there's new coaching styles coming out now, and there's data coming out. You see what's happening in America at Javelina 100 and people breaking course records, and they're going like a 10K, how a 10K person would race out from the start line. They're doing that for 100 miles now, right? Like all out racing from start to finish. Right. And there's a book called Marathon Excellence for Everyone by John J. Davis. It just launched, and I'm very excited to read that as part of our All In Book Club. But just the whole concept of this long, slow distance is evaporating now. Good for beginners, but for advanced runners, you want to do marathon pace, then 95% of marathon pace, and then 110% of marathon pace. You want to stay around that number, obviously managing all the other easy volume. You can't just be doing that. So you do your easy running, but in that 20%, 25% of the week, you're putting in that sort of pace, and preferably on longer runs so that your body learns to endure that physiologically and then also mentally, right? So I think for an experienced runner, the long, slow distance is something we are certainly moving away from. Obviously, knowing the athlete's history with injuries and all of that is important. So I'm not just recommending that everyone go run fast. Please understand where you are in your running journey. Preferably, this is why you have coaches, and this is where AI can't support you yet. That understand the journey and then figure out how do you bring quality to your training rather than just volume.
Yeah. Wonderful. Let's talk about long runs. In ultras, when people are training for 100 miles or even 100 Ks, mentally people want to take a certain distance. Like 100 करना है तो मैंने 70 कर लिया ट्रेनिंग में तो 30 ही और रह गया. Right? And you believe that approach is wrong. How should one go about approaching long runs, and how should your longest, like how do you decide what's your longest run going to be leading up to, let's say, 100K?
So traditionally, when ultra running was new around the world, people were challenging the distances, going 50K runs, training runs, 80K. I saw a lot of people doing overnight runs in preparation for the border, for the 100-miler, and so on. But physiologically, that doesn't work. It's rare now in modern ultra running coaching that people are prescribing distances or efforts beyond 4.5 hours. The muscular breakdown is too significant for the person to recover. And you'll have people who do a 70K and then next week is like a regular training week. You know, Tuesday they're running the 10K again or 14K again to do their easy run. Whereas you would never do that if you run a marathon. You take 2 weeks off because your muscular breakdown is too significant. You know, no matter how slow you ran the 70K, there's muscular breakdown happening beyond the 3.5-4 hour effort, right? So hence in modern coaching philosophy, and that's what international coaches, a lot of them are doing, is to basically pile up volume in more number of runs. So let's say if someone's doing a 70-kilometer run and maybe by that time their weekly mileage is 100 or over, I would break that into more number of runs, right? With a higher density maybe on the weekend for the working athlete, right? So you would have a 20K on a Saturday and a 35K on a Sunday. So you get about 50% volume or maybe even 60% volume of your week on those weeks. If you really want to go further, you could do a Saturday morning, Saturday evening, do a double on Saturday, and then a really long run on Sunday. So these are ways where you can modulate the same sort of training impact without the sort of muscular breakdown, without compromising your recovery, because the training block is long. A race day is one day, so you can not care beyond that day. But you gotta keep training in the block. So you gotta manage your fatigue, you gotta manage your injury risk to build up to the big day.
Right. It affects the weeks, subsequent weeks as well. which is
Absolutely.
why. So, what would you say about night running? Because people feel that a 100-miler will involve running at night and they have not run through the night, so they do need to experience
Do that, absolutely. Much recommended, and we recommend that too for our athletes who are doing ultra distances. But do it in a different way. You don't have to run through the night. You could have your regular day, be tired from the day, start your run at 2 a.m. because that's the hardest, right? The 2 to 6 is the hardest, or maybe even 1 to 5 is the hardest if you've ever done overnight, right? So maybe you do your whole day, you're tired from work and stresses and all of that. You have your regular dinner and then you prep up for your 4 to 4.5 hour run between 1 to 5. You still get that night effect. You're still tired, but you're not muscularly breaking your body down. So these are ways where you can do that. There are smarter ways to train now, and I would encourage all these people who are running 70K, 80K to just pick up a modern ultra running book or anything, and they would see all these concepts written out there.
Yeah. Wonderful.
And coaches also should pick these up because I
Sure.
see coaches prescribing these.
Yeah, exactly. While we're at this, also, I think the one rationale or reasoning for doing this or prescribing this for coaches would be a lot of people doing this for the first time and they need to break some mental barriers.
Yeah.
So how do you build that mental toughness? One way of doing it is like do it in training. Some sort of a simulation you do and then you're mentally ready for it. Like in practice, if you overcome the stages of giving up or feeling like giving up,
Right.
then in the race, you're likely to deal with it better. That's what people say. Are there other ways of building mental toughness or resilience?
Yes, certainly. But this is where long-term journey mapping is very important. So if someone is saying, I want to do a 100-miler, I haven't attempted a 100-miler for certain reasons, right? It's not easy to train for a 100-miler. I can do it today. You put me out on the track right
Yeah.
now, I'll run 100 miles. But to do it at a quality that I want in a certain way, I want to commit to that process, right? But for someone who's coming in, the journey to a 100-mile is also a beautiful one. And jumping straight to the 100 miles, you're bypassing that beautiful journey. So I'd be like, hey, you never run a 80K. Let's train for a 80K race. Let's go over that distance. Let's do it easy. You don't have to race for a time. Just do that 80K in training. Oh, you did 80K now. Let's now do another 80K but with better quality so that your 100-mile is better when you're ready for that. Oh, you've done 80K second time. Good job. Now this is 1 year already gone by, huh? Maybe even 1.5 years now. Like, hey, let's...
So you're talking about 80K races then?
Races,
Not-
yeah.
not
You can
80K
use
training.
races as a
Yeah.
way to train.
Right.
You go over that number in a race. You get a medal for it. You put in the work for it, right? And your body is adapting over this 2-3 year journey. It's
Right.
getting used to ultra distances, getting stronger. You're getting better as a runner. You're getting more efficient. You know fueling better.
And you're building that mental toughness that we're
and
talking
mental
about.
toughness. So don't do
so
it.
there are no
suddenly.
hacks and bypasses. Like
There are no shortcuts in this
Yeah.
sport, unfortunately. And as I said, if you take those shortcuts, your journey will rarely go beyond 5 years. Name me, and this is a pure case in Delhi. I think Bangalore, Bombay have amazing veteran runners who've been running for decades. You'd have a hard time finding veteran runners who've been running for 2 decades in Delhi. You know, there's a reason they come in. Motivations of Delhi runners is very different, I feel. And very few really sustain that sort of ultra running space because of this fast forward movement in the sport.
But there are veteran runners in Delhi.
There are.
Yeah.
Compared to where they started, there are so many people who went into that ultra running journey in the first 3 to 5 years.
Right.
How many of them are still surviving over 2 decades of running is the question.
That is a large number of people that have gone out of sport for various reasons, who did this too much too quickly.
Yeah,
then
and this is
it's
where like
yeah.
a coach's job is to be a soundboard. Really in the age of AI, our job is really to be a good soundboard, right? I think there are a lot of experienced runners who know a lot about the sport, the theories. There are many runners who know better theories in sport than I do. They've read more books than I have, you know. But it's good to like just talk it out with someone and maybe exchange ideas, bang heads sometimes, have disagreements,
Right.
and then come to a solution.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Great. Since we're talking about takeaways, tell us about recovery, because I feel your approach in that is also slightly different from traditionally what people advise. Like if you run, so most of the people who ran about 100K within a week, they were running again, like they're doing their 10Ks and 15Ks and 20Ks. What should be the recovery time after, let's say, a 10K race, a 21K race, a marathon, and a 100K?
Yeah, again, it varies on many factors. It could be someone doing their first half marathon may need a week of recovery because their body breakdown is high. They've never done that distance, especially if they, let's say, had a shorter training block where their body didn't adapt to it. Someone like me or Shreyans or you doing an easy marathon, the muscle breakdown may not be as intense as, let's say, a sub-3 marathon. There will be muscle breakdown, but maybe not as
So it depends on the intensity of the effort.
intensity, experience, all of that. But generally, over a 4-hour effort, your muscle breakdown is there. You're going low on your glycogen reserves. Then your body is going into that sort of muscle breakdown phase. So typically, over that effort, you should a hard 4+ hour effort in a race scenario. You're probably taking at least 2 weeks off, if not sometimes 3 to 4 weeks off. There are many ultra runners internationally top level that take the entire month off after UTMB or something. Right? They're not doing any running. You know, they may go some cycling or something, and that too after 2 weeks of recovery. So I would, as a simple rule, just don't do anything for 2 weeks. Maximum you can go for walks after 7-10 days. Or
So what is the advice to all the border ultra finishers?
Yeah, don't do anything for 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
Don't do anything for 2 weeks. Even if you're running a hard 50K, let your body recover. If it's over that 40K number, you want to, even a hard 35K could be very damaging, you know. So give it 2 weeks. In that, again, based on your experience in sport, age in sport, there could be adaptations to that.
Yeah.
This is interesting because in a coaching process now, we break these rules. At All In Running also, we break these rules. Because after this huge experience of reaching a high after finishing such incredible race and maybe best achievement of their life so far, you know, they have this high and suddenly there is a low point after a race, as every racer would have experienced. So sometimes after this 1 week or 6-7 days, we'll give them a walk, go for a 30. So at least it's on their plan. So mentally, they're still tuned in. They may not be able to run, but we're giving them some other activity, do a upper body workout 6 days in the gym after 6 days after in the gym. So we're giving them something to do. Maybe we'll give 4K runs 7-10 days after the race, just to keep them happy. The body still doesn't take it well, but just to keep the psyche of the athlete ready. So this is also part of the coaching process. Sometimes we break our own rules to understand the individual and give them the solution that will keep them in the game long term.
Yeah. No, I don't think I've seen enough people talking about this. In fact, hardly any about the high after, like the low after the race, because the race is a big high, especially a big effort, and especially in ultra distances where you've gone through a lot, like, and for hours, right? So after that, there is the emotions are a little all over the place, and
one should mentally decompress, but not everyone knows how to mentally decompress. Many of us in India don't work with psychologists, so we don't have that toolkit to know how to mentally decompress, right? Which is why we have a psychologist on the program, right? But yeah, like recovery at the end, also speaking of recovery, one is the duration, and then also just during training, as you may know, we are not proponents of ice baths and dry needling and all of that. I think these are effective tools, but scientifically, they show more placebo effect than actual effect. And recently only I shared a lovely video by Nutrition Facts that's just been launched about all the cold plunges and all, and how there's no science behind it. Rather, it has a detrimental impact on recovery, right? So if you look at the science, the best way to recover is sleep and good nutrition, right? And timing of nutrition also, right? Right after, how soon are you putting in the calories after a hard effort and all of that. So sleep and nutrition, which are the easiest and most non-commercial things to do, is what sells. But unfortunately, the whole space of digital media is full of all these quick solutions. I think these solutions work if you're a Djokovic and you just played a 5-setter and you got to go into the match the next day also. I think then these recovery tools can give you that edge on getting the maximum out of the time that you have. But for us, I think we have better ways to recover, and we need to stop distracting ourselves with these ways of recovery.
Yeah. While we're at it, do you want to touch upon nutrition and hydration quickly? So, hydration in particular, a lot of runners in India run without water and forget electrolytes.
Yeah.
They don't have a handheld. They just
Yeah.
half marathon तो मुझे चाहिए नहीं
Yeah,
होता
yeah.
कुछ भी, right?
And that's something, again, one of the things we do differently at All In Running is from day one, someone just joined the program doing a 25-minute activity. But number one rule is run slow as you can. Number two rule is make sure you have a water bottle in your hand. I don't care what you do. You're not allowed to go out without this water bottle. And I have a full blog on Strava on why running with your own hydration and fueling helps you do faster races for most amateur runners. Yes, if you're like Shreyans and running 240s, maybe then using the route is better because you're just at that level of speed and effort. But for most people like me, even at sub 3, I can run with my own hydration a faster race than using the route, right? And so we start mimicking that in training. How to and eventually, like, we have so many people who join All In Running, experienced runners who've never done that. And I promise you, in 3 months, they come to a point that they never want to run without hydration and fueling, right? It's a complete shift. And because they realize how key fueling is. And if you look at modern ultra trail marathoning or ultra running, it's all going towards more caloric intake, more hydration, more fueling.
Yeah.
And people are performing at insane levels. In addition to super shoes, this is the other big revolution that's come in, is this boundary of what we thought we could consume on a run per hour is being stretched by these elite runners, right? And that's resulting, at least in the ultra running and trail space, to like incredible performances that were never imaginable. And we are not even averaging 200 kilocalories an hour. An Indian runner is barely eating anything, and we've made some funny reels on our Instagram about gels and natural fueling and all of that. But it's to break these myths that we have about eating. You have to put in calories. You have to put in a certain volume of hydration per hour. These are like very measured things. And if you're not measured, you need to measure them in training. And hopefully a coach can help you really dial this in. You dial in your nutrition and fueling, your race performance is secured.
You want to give away some general principles for fueling and hydration?
Yeah, sure. I think on a road run, you're looking at anywhere between 200 to 250 kcal per hour. In ultra running, you want to go north of 300 kilocalories an hour as long as you can, right? That's in terms of...
And to do that in training as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Because your gut is not trained to digest food when you're running. It takes away the blood and gives blood to the arms and the limbs to cool down, right? So your body's focus on cooling down. Body's not expecting us to eat while we're running as much. So we have to then train the gut to say, okay, 150 calorie an hour, okay, 200 calorie an hour, 250 calorie an hour. So it's a multi-month journey to train your gut to be able to digest all of this. And I haven't even gotten there yet, It's a journey that you're on. So I think that 200 to 250 for the road runner, 300 plus for an ultra marathoner. If you can push it to 400, insane. In terms of hydration, again, varies with weather. Now in Delhi in winter, 350 to 500 ml per hour is good enough. But if you're in hot Chennai weather today, even now, 650 to 900 ml per hour could be good enough. So, and this is preferably sports energy drinks, then water, more to replenish the electrolytes. Sodium, you're looking at anywhere between 500 to 1,000 mg per hour, depending on sweat rates and various factors. So these are just numbers you got to hit.
Yeah.
Right? And there are enough nutrition science books out there that are giving these numbers.
What would you say to those who say, I went out for a run and I just ran without, I maybe ran with water, but electrolytes I replenish after the run.
Right.
So what is the difference there?
It's like when you feel thirsty, your body is now slightly dehydrated. It's lost some water. Right? And now if you ask me to run after being dehydrated suddenly, my body can't perform at the same level. Whereas if, let's say, I had a glass of water here and I'd been sipping through this, my ability to run immediately after this recording is better. Same thing, right? Your ability to recover after your runs is better. Your ability to perform during the activity is better if you're keeping the body fueled. So it's like more so we're seeing more change on the recovery. We've recently moved to a high-calorie coaching mechanism at All In Running. We're recommending more people to take in more calories per hour. And the biggest change we're seeing is not during the run. the biggest change we're seeing is after the run. The recovery time has diminished massively, and we hear this from international coaches and podcasts and all of that, and we're seeing this in our data. So it's amazing to see, and I would recommend everyone to experiment with more calories per hour.
So recovery runs, we've heard that lactate gets flushed if you do a recovery run, or even if you go for a longer walk the following day. That's the advice floating around generally. What do you have to say to that?
Again, person to person, journey to journey. If there's someone who's done their first 50K ever, and they have probably done one marathon or some 1-2 long distances before, their body's probably pretty destroyed. So I would say just sleep more, eat well, fuel the body. If you can go for a walk, it won't hurt, but certainly not a run. I see a lot of people doing a marathon, a really fast marathon or a really fast ultra, and then going for a recovery run the next day. I would not prescribe to it. Take it easy for a week.
Yeah.
And you probably need that mental decompression also. You put in so many months of work. Now let go and just relax, sleep in, eat well,
Yeah.
Focus on those things rather than trying to maximize how do I recover fastest. Unless you have some race, and then even then there's a strategic plan that can be devised.
Yeah. No, I'm not sure if you talked about this before, but on the mental decompression bit, I think it's really important. Very few people talk about it. When you go through a deep experience like an ultra or even like a fast effort of any kind, it does leave some emotional baggage later, and you do feel like a low, like emotions are a little all over the place, and they need to be processed.
Even if you have a great race, do a DNF, right?
Yeah.
Both of them have a mental impact, right? And at some point, we as coaches can help, but that's why we have psychologists on the team who can come and look at it from a very technical perspective, give the right recommendations to manage those times, or work with you. I don't think recommendations, but they work with you to figure out that way to manage that time.
Yeah. Great. Sadly, our beautiful city turns into a gas chamber at this time of the year, which is really disheartening because there are so many runners, passionate runners in the city who want to head out and are really discouraged. And it's really sad. But it also concerns me to see so many of my close friends actually going out for runs in 500 AQI or 400 AQI. Or they console themselves by saying, it was only 359. How bad do you think that is, and what would you say to them?
Yeah, as I've been pretty vocal about this, I'm not a big fan of people running outside in pollution. Now, we have our own Indian standard way of pollution. Look, we are developing...
Even the government saying we should have different standards of AQI. The
Right.
global standards don't apply to us.
Right. I think, there is one way where you look at a health way, and it's like anything over 70, 80 then starts getting long-term, has some long-term damage. But in a developing country around the world, you see around 150 to 200 as an average. Not to justify it or say, I think this whole pollution thing is not a Delhi problem. Delhi gets a bad light. I'm a bit of a Delhi fanboy, as you know, because of capital trails and the trails that we have and all the green that we have in the city, the most in the country for sure. But it's a public policy problem, right? This whole pollution thing. It's unfortunate that the people responsible don't have a short-term or a long-term plan for it, but we have to deal with it. There are multiple Instagram videos we put out. We don't recommend people going out without a mask for sure. If it's over 200 AQI, technically you should wear a mask over 100, but we say, okay, Indian standard, wear over 200 because 150 is sort of normal. You can't be living that sort of life, even though there is some detrimental impact to your health. So over 200, wear a mask. Over 300, just don't go outside, right? So you have that spectrum, 200 to 300, wear a mask and run. And that's something, as you know, at All In Running, we push. But over 300, just find an indoor space. Like the Delhi Development Authority has many gyms that some of them have air purifiers now. You can get a day pass. There are other private gyms that you can get a day pass, affordable relatively. So that's how I've been managing. I don't have a gym membership. I've just been going to private gyms and managing that. And expense ratio wise, it doesn't come out as bad because you're only doing it on 2, 3, 4 days in a week. You will get clear days. On the weekend, you can go in the afternoon. Today, for example, yesterday was 500 plus. Right now it's dropped. Even now it's under 200 at night.
Right now?
Right now.
Wow.
So again, you just monitor through multiple resources. I would also say don't track your default weather app for pollution. Go to multiple platforms, AQICN, IQ Air, Plume Labs. Go to multiple resources and see what sort of data you find, and then use your common sense to average it out. There are sensors that are bad also. So just figure out what works. But yeah, we're not keen. And despite all the complaints that our runners, our community shares with running with masks, I do recommend sports pollution masks like the ID mask and other O2 curve and all that Nirvana being sells. I think they help a little bit. They make it hard, but like today, I've been using it for so many years that it's second nature. I'm not proud to be using a mask. The air should be cleaner, but that's the solution. And I don't justify runners going out at 350, 400. This is including people at All In Running. I've criticized them also for this. But it's personal choice. I can't force them. I can only recommend people through this podcast or otherwise, but I can't force them.
Yeah.
So it's to their own individual. And even this one Instagram reel that we put out, we got a lot of, you have positive people who give you kudos, and you have people who will criticize you for no matter what messaging. In that reel, I've clearly said, don't go out beyond 300.
Right.
And then, but people are still attacking, saying, why are you telling wear this mask and that? We should be telling people to sit home. And I don't think so. I think physical activity is important, especially for an active person.
Yeah.
I think we have to just find solutions on managing this problem. And it is a problem. And unfortunately, this public health problem is here to stay for a while, it seems. So it's unfortunate.
So in this AQIO 400, 500, what sort of masks work? Do you think like a general bandana or a surgical mask would do?
No, not at all. It's not purifying the air in any way, right? You have specific N95 masks, preferably get from known brands like 3M or something. They still have some research behind their technology. So wear a nice, expensive mask. Not expensive, but whatever, branded, recognized, proven mask company. And the 3M mask will make a nice vacuum around your face, right? Or just get a reusable mask. You're really good. Thanks to COVID, we have some really good quality, reusable, washable masks out there if you don't want to create trash. For sports, I think the regular masks don't work. You got to have a dedicated sports pollution mask, like the Nirvana being ID masks and others that are out there.
Okay, wonderful. And finally, 2026 is going to be here, or it will actually be well and truly here when this podcast goes out. And that is the resolution season. People will be setting out their goals. I've heard you do a couple of talks with some corporates about mapping your fitness journey. So please help our audience map their fitness journey as they go about setting new goals in 2026.
Yeah. Firstly, Happy New Year to everyone who may be listening in 2026, right? I think this is a very important part of anyone's fitness journey. This is something that we don't do well enough, or coaches don't do well enough. So at All In Running, this is the first step we take. And as part of this, we have a slide where we show purpose, goal, and then long-term and short-term, right? And really, a lot of people start from the short-term and long-term without like really defining the purpose. At All In Running, at least in my heart, my purpose is to get people to nature, to outside experiences, to outdoor experiences, through All In Running, through our camps, through our capital trails, through whatever that may be. That's my life's mission, because I truly believe that people become better if they see nature around them. They become more sensitive, and then their actions then transform into being more sensitive about their impact on this planet. Without that connection, I think we've lost our way anyways with this. So I think having outdoor experience is important. So define that purpose. That purpose could be aesthetically having a very good looking body, For some purpose might be to go to mountains and explore that, right? But the purpose is not just to climb Everest or climb a big mountain. It's to like, what do you get out of that experience? So I think you want to go one level deeper and figure out what gives you joy, what gives you happiness that will sustain you for many years, So it's sort of like a long-term assessment.
Should you also consider, are you willing to do the grind that's required to get there?
That is part and parcel of anything beautiful, be it a beautiful relationship or anything else. There is beauty in it and there is a grind, right?
Yeah.
Always.
Yeah.
And one can't go without the other. It's the yin and the yang. And so I think that's part of it. But if the beautiful part of that journey or that experience should overcome the other aspect of it. As long as that's happening, your purpose is good.
What a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much for making time, Nakul.
Thanks so much.
So looking forward to having more coaches and, spreading this knowledge and awareness and bringing out the coaching scene and different perspectives from different coaches.
I'm very excited to hear more perspectives and views and all of that. So best of luck for this series that you're making. And I look forward to hearing many more episodes.
Thank you. Happy New Year
Happy New Year.
in
Cheers.
advance.
Yeah.